Death Valley Insider is your home for LSU sports coverage on the Rivals.com and Yahoo Sports Network. Check us out at DeathValleyInsider.com, our YouTube page, LSU Tigers on Rivals, and of course over on Twitter. I still call it Twitter, at LSU Rivals. This week we're doing Crosstalk with Jack Byers of the Mississippi State rival site. So, Jack, I'm going to just give you the floor, let you just introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
So I've been covering Mississippi State for a couple of years now. I'm still a student there right now. I started during my sophomore year. I'm just starting my senior year right now. This will be my second football season because I started during baseball season. But I'm just excited to get back into SEC play for football season. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm trying to do, but I think the last couple of years, everything I've been doing with Rivals has been pretty fun, and maybe that's something I continue in the future.
Good. That's something that I love, like seeing younger people like you, like really get your feet into it at this level. Because I tell everybody, like, don't do like I did, like, go to college, graduate, and you kind of put your toe in the game and don't really dibble dabble into it until later on in life. And then it's like, it's more of a struggle. So if you got the opportunity to dive, headfirst into it right now, and it seems like you're doing a great job because, like you said, this is your second football season. You started doing baseball season. You're going into your senior year now, and you're at a really good school to cover a wide variety of sports in a wide variety of different ways. So kudos to you, man. Props to you. So first, I just want to start off by referencing your article. You specifically wrote it on BulldogBlitz.com, for those who aren't aware of the Mississippi State Rivals website. And it was titled "Defending Daniels' Legs Will Be Crucial." Like last year's game, you referenced last year's game where, for almost the whole first half, the Bulldog defense had LSU under check. And I want to say it was like the last drive of the first half that LSU had, where Daniels just clicked. The light just went off and he just realized, okay, here's how I need to start playing moving forward. And it seems like he and the LSU offense were able to make adjustments, and especially a lot of his adjustments were on the fly with him scrambling around. How do you see that playing out for the Mississippi State Bulldogs on this game this year, going into it knowing what Daniels is fully capable of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously last year's game, I felt like just that first quarter and a half, like they pretty much shut down everything LSU had wanted to do. And Daniels, he just kind of said, I know what I can do. I'm going to just make things happen with my legs. And, he just, it was obviously Daniels is a very veteran quarterback, and he was able to just pick things up when Mississippi State wasn't adjusting to some of those openings that they were giving them on defense. And I think this year that's kind of what they want to focus on. That's something that they've struggled with, not just against Daniels but against other rushing quarterbacks. Last week they faced Jaden DeLora at Arizona. He doesn't run quite as much as Daniels does, but he's a guy that really likes to get outside the pocket. And, there were times where they struggled to get him. So, obviously that's something that they're really focusing on this week. I do think they do have some personnel that is able to help contain him. You look at their linebackers, obviously that's kind of the spot you look at when you're trying to stop a rushing quarterback. Jet Johnson and Buki Watson were number 1 and number 2 in the SEC in tackles last season. I don't know if they move laterally enough to completely contain him. Their other linebacker, it's different this year. So last year they had Tyrus Wheat over at Sam linebacker. He was more of a pass rushing guy. This year it is Tyrus Wheat. I don't think he's on the practice squad with the Cowboys. This year it's Deshaun Page. He was a guy who came up through JUCO. He's been in reserve for the last couple of years. He's more of your speedy guy, more coverage guy. I'm interested to see how they use him here, because normally they have been sending him off the edge, even though that's not his strength. But I do feel like if they do want to, kind of worry about Daniels a little bit, they'll have him disengage a little bit. So that's kind of the matchup I'm interested to see. That's definitely the guy on the Mississippi State defense that I feel like has to have a good game if they want to contain Daniels.
Yeah, that was actually one of my other follow-up questions I normally like to ask is there a particular defender or two, you can just, elaborate on your last point, that you feel are going to be particularly valuable, not only just defending Daniels, kind of what you alluded to there, but is there another defender besides him that you see like, okay, we have somebody who we think could match up good spying or keeping an eye on Jake Daniels, but is there another defender that you think would cause the LSU Tiger offense some issues?
I think it all comes down to is what they can if they can get push on the interior. I think last year that's what they did a really good job of, and that's kind of what forced Daniels to kind of have to run. They have a lot of those guys back on the interior. Nathan Pickering at nose guard is a really talented kid. Last year when they played LSU, Jaden Crumedy didn't play. He was injured. He's back this year. He's another just experienced guy, 6th-year guy up front. And those two guys in the middle can get a lot of push. Maybe they can kind of force Daniels into some, awkward positions. I think that's really where it starts. And then obviously, if Daniels is getting outside the pocket, I think it really is on Deshaun Page, who probably is their fastest linebacker.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I thought would be a good guy to kind of spy Daniels a little bit. And I've seen some different concepts of different defenses that will, they won't just have a spy, be the traditional quarterback spy standing right in the middle of the defense and he's just shadowing him, here and there. I've seen teams do some interesting things where they'll tease a guy coming off the edge and then he drops back and just kind of spies the quarterback. I've seen guys, come from the nickel slot and spy the quarterback or different things. The safeties drop down in the box. And, so I was just wondering when Mississippi State is keying in on this defense, besides Jayden Daniels, obviously, and I'll say besides Malik Neighbors at wide receiver, because those were two guys that were very prominent in last year's success, is there someone else on that LSU offense that you think this Mississippi State defense needs to key in on?
I'm trying to think. I would probably say what's the other wide receiver? The 6'4" one?
Brian Thomas Jr.
Brian Thomas, 6'4". Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say him on the outside. That's probably, last week when they played Arizona, they had a guy, Tetarawa McMillan. He's similar build, and he kind of torched them deep a few times. I think they have the personnel to kind of stay with the speedy types like Malik Neighbors. I do think they might struggle with those like bigger type receivers. Thomas. So that's probably the one guy, in the receiving room that I think that they might need to focus on watching more so than Neighbors.
Yeah, he and Kyron Lacy, those were the two guys that I said would probably step up the most because of their size. Thomas, of course, like you said, is 6'4", and Lacy's, I think, 6'2", 215. But then there was Chris Hunt Jr. last week against Grambling, 47-yarder, and he's showing off that, that sub 4.3 speed. And just guys like that, I think, are going to present a big matchup. And I've always loved bigger receivers. So when you name, specifically Brian Thomas Jr., I was like, yeah, I think so, because I thought Kyron Lacy would be the next guy up, to say, okay, besides Malik Neighbors, who's going to be the next wide receiver that would step up? I thought it would be Lacy because he had the experience, but it seems like Thomas is, factoring in big time. Speaking of offense, on the Mississippi State side of the ball, Will Rogers comes back, and this passing attack, is it quite what it used to be under Mississippi State and under, former head coach Mike Leach, rest in peace? This passing attack just doesn't seem to me to feel quite the same. Even the last year or so under Leach, I didn't really feel like it was a traditional Mike Leach, passing offense. What should we expect as far as the Mississippi State offense going into this game against this LSU defense? Because teams have been able to take advantage so far. Florida State did it all game in their game, and then Grambling did it in the first quarter very well, but they couldn't, continue the success. But how do you see this Mississippi State passing attack attacking this LSU defense?
So they got the new offensive coordinator now, Kevin Barbay, who comes in from Appalachian State, and that was a much more balanced offense than obviously what Mike Leach ran. Mike Leach was one of the most aggressive passing, led the nation in passing yards, or not yards, attempts like 3 years in a row. And this year it's kind of been a complete flip. In that Arizona game, they got ahead early, and I think they got really conservative and they just tried to run the football almost too much. I think they need to dial that back a little bit and get a little more balanced. I do think they have some weapons that can kind of, make some things happen, in the receiving room. Justin Robinson's a big guy. We haven't really seen him do a whole lot yet just because they've been kind of so conservative, but he was a guy that really impressed me in training camp. The guy that they really like to get in space is Tulu Griffin. He was an All-American kick returner last year. For whatever reason, Leach liked to play him at X, and this year he's in the slot, and they're getting him, all types of opportunities for runs after the catch and things like that. But for the most part, it is an offense that is going to run the football. Jaquavius Marks was a guy last 3 years. A lot of people just kind of labeled him as a pass catching running back because that's what he was asked to do in Mike Leach's offense. But he's a guy that is really physical between the tackles, and I think we've really seen that this year. Right now, he leads the SEC in rushing yards, and he has some burst in at that second level, but he's a guy that's not afraid to take a hit, and we've still seen that receiving prowess from him that he was able to develop while he was playing in the air raid, and I think that's made him a very valuable running back for Mississippi State right now.
Yeah, Marks is definitely the guy that I keyed in on because seeing just the rushing attempts from the team where they got almost 80 attempts running the ball and just over 46, I would say it's 46 pass attempts. So it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio running as to passing, whereas before it would be like a 3-to-1 pass to run ratio under Leach. So I do see the difference in the offense there. And Marks just really stuck out because he's the leading rusher in the SEC, like we just mentioned, but he's also the team's second leading receiver with 8 catches for 91 yards. So he's a huge weapon. And I was like, okay, if there's anybody that they need to key in on, it would be, okay, let's try to cut the head off the snake, see what we can do about stuffing this run, especially since they got Mason Smith back, and some of those other guys filled in admirably in his absence against Florida State. Just that defensive front and that Mississippi State, wanting to run the ball, 2 out of 3 plays. I can't wait to see that matchup because I love to see what goes on in the trenches. And I know sometimes people don't think of college football as physical anymore because there's more spread offenses and whatnot. It doesn't matter if you have, a 6 offensive lineman and 2 tight ends, or if you just got your 5 linemen and you're spread 4 wide with a running back in the backfield. Running the ball is running the ball. You still move forward. The offensive line needs to get a push. They need to get blocks. They need to seal holes off and create running lanes for running backs and whatnot. So I'm still looking forward to that matchup. One of the other things that I like to discuss is just something kind of off topic. And when I looked at the history of this rivalry, I'll say LSU leads at 77-36, and there's 3 ties in there. LSU's the longest win streak belongs to LSU between 2000 and 2014. There were 14 straight. So Mississippi State's longest margin of victory in this rivalry was from 80 to 84. They won 5 straight. With such the imbalance here, and just LSU pretty much dominating this matchup and winning the last 2 years, do you think Mississippi State really has a shot?
I think so.
Keep it within the number.
To keep it within like
because the line is 9.5.
Yeah.
Do you think Mississippi State has a chance to cover that 9.5?
I think so, because I think their defense is still, even if they're able to, Daniels breaks off for a few big plays, I still think the defense as a whole is one that is going to be able to really stop LSU's rushing attack to kind of make them a little more one-dimensional. That's what they've done to pretty much every team they've played outside of Alabama the last couple of years. Offensively, there's still some wrinkles that they're still trying to figure out. I think what it comes down to is what does the offensive line look like? The offensive line is one that it's very experienced, but not in this system. It's one that they have so many reps dropping back in the air raid. They don't have a lot of reps pulling guards and just doing all these wrinkles in the run game. And that's kind of where they've struggled a little bit, early in the season. I would imagine as the season progresses, that's something that they get better at. But, is that this week? Is that next week? That I don't know. The other thing was last year when they did face LSU offensively, some of the, different disguises that LSU did, that was kind of, I remember that was week 3. I think that was like Harold Perkins' like first like really big game, if you remember. And he came, I was like, this kid's a freshman and he's just killing them. So I'm interested to see, what they do with him. I know they've put him in a few different spots to start the season, but that was another thing that some of the different things that they did, disguising blitzes and stuff kind of confused them last season. So if they can kind of handle that a little better, that'll help them as well. Obviously the home field advantage helps a lot, but, it is definitely a matchup that I wouldn't exactly pick Mississippi State to win, but they can keep it. Yeah, they can keep it within 10 or 9.5 or whatever the spread is currently.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask about is LSU, when they play home games, is typically a 6, 7 o'clock kick, always a night game, always a great atmosphere in Baton Rouge there at Tiger Stadium. What's up with the 11 o'clock kickoffs in Mississippi State?
Yeah.
I know college football kicks off at 11, but every time I think about college football kicking off at 11, I'm thinking, some Big 10, Big 12 maybe school or something like that. I'm not used to an SEC game kicking off until at least 2:30, 3 o'clock maybe. What's up with the 11 a.m. kickoff?
Yeah, it's the TV networks, man. Like, I remember when they released that schedule over the summer, everyone in our fan base was so pissed, right? Like, when you have those big games, you want them just to be at night. Like when I think of, when I want to see Mississippi State on the road, when they're picking off upsets on the road, I'm like, I want that game at 11 a.m. because I know the, atmosphere is not going to be quite the same. But, it's the TV networks. That game's going to be on ESPN. Personally, I don't mind being on SEC Network if it's a night game, but, the game's going to be on the main ESPN, which I guess it'll get more viewers, but from the in-stadium perspective, that's not quite as good for Mississippi State.
Yeah, having to host a post-game show immediately after the game, the only thing I thought about was like, well, I won't need to use the ring light. I'll just have natural lighting behind it again. But it was just kind of weird because the other thing to me is, even if I'm a TV network, right, I'm thinking of the tailgating between two neighboring states, two football schools that have a rich tradition. Why not put that game, at least later on in the afternoon, not early morning game or first thing in the early afternoon game, but like a later afternoon game. It doesn't even have to be a 6, 7 o'clock kick. Make it a 3:30 or so. And just allow people to have some of the day to tailgate and get into it, But hey, the one thing that I am happy about was that I saw the game time kickoff temp will be in the mid 70s. So I'm very happy about that because whether you're playing in Baton Rouge or you're playing in Starkville, playing an 11 o'clock kick in September can be brutal. So that was a good thing. One other thing I wanted to just ask you about, kind of kick around here, is when we look at these two teams right now, Mississippi State is 2-0, LSU is 1-1. This is each team's first conference game. The SEC West is, to me, I think the most competitive and probably the most brutal division in college football. I can't see a division or anything like that remotely models up next to the level of competition from the first team to the last team in the SEC West. This game can go a long way in determining who can actually win this division, with Bama being seen beaten by Texas. LSU lost to Florida State. Those two teams were picked basically 1 and 2 in the West. Do you think Mississippi State understands the magnitude of what not only beating LSU, but beating a conference and a division rival in the first conference game of the year?
Zach Arnett's a guy that he doesn't like to talk about that a whole lot. He was asked about that, during his presser on Monday. He was like, what would a win over LSU do for your program? What does that help recruiting and everything? And he's just like, the way I see it, we're 1-0 in the conference. That's the only thing that matters to him. And, I think that's a good mindset. Maybe internally he's like, yeah, LSU would be a, major win. I personally think it would be a great, win, not only to, boost your brand, but knock off a, contender in your conference. That's a great thing to happen for, Mississippi State if that were to happen. But I don't know if Mississippi State necessarily has that mindset. I think they're more of, just trying to go out and win a football game. At least that's what they say they are planning on doing.
Yeah, I love the coach talk, and
Yeah.
sometimes some friends and I will go in a group chat and we'll like translate what a coach says. Like we'll post the tweet or the clip or whatever, and then like, okay, let's translate it and see what he really means by this.
Yeah.
So that's always fun to do. One other thing I kind of forgot to ask, circling back a little bit, was: is there an LSU defender or two or however many outside of, like, let's say Howard Perkins Jr. or Mason Smith, some of the more obvious names? Is there a guy on that defense that you think Mississippi State is going to have a hard time and before every snap, like, hey, there's that guy, point him out, see where he is, what he's doing?
I would say probably Mekhi Wingo. I mean, that's probably another cop-out answer. You could probably just throw him right in with Perkins and Mason Smith. But, that's one thing that I've noticed when Mississippi State has struggled. It's been, are they blocking the interior? Is the other team getting pushed on the interior? That's obviously something that Mekhi Wingo is very good at. If they can, contain him a little bit, that's obviously going to make things a lot easier for them. But that's probably the one that they need to key in on the most, I would say.
Yeah, Wingo is the guy that I really like along that defensive front because, Mason Smith may be more highly touted. They may have guys transferred in from West Virginia and Syracuse at defensive tackle. You look at guys are on the edge, and Harold Perkins Jr., you look at those two safeties, and, you look at Denver Harris coming in, and Zy Alexander and Deuce Chestnut, and sometimes these other guys can get lost in the shuffle. But I think Wingo, being the honoree for the traditional number 18 at LSU, which is basically like not only a good player but also a model citizen, he's a really good 3 technique to play next to a big nose tackle like a Mason Smith, who has that size and that bulk, whereas Wingo is a little not small but a smaller size defensive tackle. A lot quicker, a lot more mobile. He like when he gets off the ball, he almost shoots the gap and forces the guard and centers to double team him.
Yeah.
So I could clearly see what you mean when you say an inside push, and he would be the guy to look at.
Yeah, 100%. Even last week against Arizona, they had a couple. Arizona, that's a team that they got a couple guys coming in through the transfer portal that were pretty big guys. They got a kid from Georgia who, he didn't play a whole lot at Georgia, but that's still a highly coveted kid from his time in high school. And he was able to get, some big push on the interior. And obviously, when you're facing LSU, that's going to be a step up in competition. So, that's really the biggest thing for Mississippi State's offense is just give Will Rogers some time. Don't let that pocket collapse very quickly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm hoping for, is that LSU can, that defensive front can help those DBs out, because it seems like this year when the defensive front isn't getting a push, those DBs are good, but they can only cover for so long. And that was my original worry, was that, Mississippi State has been running the ball more, but that's why I asked that question earlier, because I was like, okay, hey, look, would they, bring up more of those pass concepts, seeing how LSU has struggled against the pass? So that was something that I'm just kind of keeping an eye on this season. I really think when it boils down to it, it's going to come down to how does LSU stop Mississippi State's run, because they want to run the ball so much. And I think for Mississippi State is, can they take advantage of LSU's pass defense deficiencies, the struggles that they've been having passing the ball? I think those two factors will determine pretty much how this game is going to go. And I know it's a lot on when Mississippi State has the ball on offense, just because I just truly believe that if LSU comes in with a game plan and Mississippi State figures out a way to stop it, Jay Daniels is going to figure something out at some point. I just you even mentioned it, how the defensive coordinator Bloom has faced him 3 times, and he's pretty much torched him, all 3 times. So it's
Yeah.
like this kid is going to figure something out. So on that side of the ball, I'm kind of confident, but on the other side of the ball is where I kind of tend to struggle. But uh, to wrap it up, final score predictions. Who do you think wins? What do you think the final score will be?
I'm going to go with LSU to win. I do think this is a game where both defenses are going to come out and play pretty good. I really like both defenses here. I know LSU has struggled with the secondary, but we have not really seen Mississippi State unleash that passing attack yet. And I would like to believe that that was just them being extremely conservative against Arizona, but that might just be what they want to do. I'm not totally sure. We've only seen this offense for 2 games, so with that being said, I think this is going to end up being kind of a lower scoring game. I would say LSU maybe wins like 28-17 or something. That would probably be my pick.
Man, that's weird because I was thinking 27-17, and I was like, well, no, Mississippi State might end up getting the score here. So maybe 27-21, something like that. But I was thinking along those lines because I was thinking I think Mississippi State covers the 9.5, and I think this game stays under the 54.5. So that's kind of what I was thinking, that LSU wouldn't be able or I'm sorry, Mississippi State would cover the 9.5, and the game would go under because these two defenses look. They're true SEC caliber defenses where you could look up and down these lineups and see a number of these guys playing on Sundays. I really like what Mississippi State tends to bring because they always end up having big, strong, fast athletes. And I mean, this goes back to like Fred Smoot, Chris Jones for the Kansas City Chiefs, and guys like that. Like, I remember like all these guys from back in the day, like Mississippi State always has a big physical team, and especially their defense. When you had the consecutive quarterbacks, you had Dak Prescott, and then I can't remember the quarterback that was right after him, another
Nick
big,
Fitzgerald.
yeah, another
Nick
big,
Fitzgerald.
strong,
Yeah.
physical guy at quarterback. And I'm like we got rid of that one guy, and then now they got this, and it's like it's one after the next. Like they come in waves and droves, and it's one thing that I always like about the matchups between these two teams because you're going to see two SEC caliber teams, two teams that look like these guys could all play on Sundays again, and just meeting up. So I think my final score prediction. I know I got to get this turned in to Jefferson soon, but I think I'm going to go with 28-20 LSU. 28-20. Mississippi State will just barely cover that 9.5, and the game will stay right under that 54.5. I think 28-20 is what we're looking at. I don't see either team being able to score more than 4 touchdowns. I just can't see either one of these defenses letting another team go up and down the field, and I don't think that these offenses will turn the ball over. One other thing I did notice is that LSU's been pretty disciplined this year. They only have 4 penalties on the whole year, 4 accepted penalties. I want to say the first game, one was a pass interference and a personal foul. And in this past game, there was a 5-yarder. I think it was a false start or something, then another procedural penalty. So they've been pretty disciplined this year. So I don't see the turnovers or penalties being a problem. I just see these two defenses being so stout and physical that the offenses have trouble moving the ball up and down the field.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Mississippi State, they created 5 turnovers against Arizona, but, that is a very different style quarterback. Even our defensive coordinator comes out and says, yeah, that's a gunslinger quarterback. I don't think Jaden Daniels is a gunslinger. I think he's a little more smarter. He's one that's going to, more look to run if he's in trouble more so than just kind of chuck it. So it's going to be a little different there. But, if Mississippi State can get some pressure, they have some guys who, can create some turnovers. The one thing that Mississippi State's defense has done really well with is just getting their hands on the ball. When it's thrown up. They had 2 tip drill picks in that game against Arizona. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, you mentioned the penalties. They had one corner who had 2 penalties in that Arizona game, and they ended up benching him and putting in a different cornerback at halftime. So I would look for DeCarlos Nicholson to start the game at the second corner, opposite of DeCameron Richardson on Saturday. And he's another guy he's pretty tall. He's taller than Asias Verges. So I think he's a guy who can maybe make some plays on the ball, but we'll kind of see how that plays out. Offensive line has committed a couple penalties for Mississippi State, but nothing like too serious. So it's not like a major concern until it really starts to really show, which I don't think it will with the veterans that they have up there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the game. It's like it kind of is going to throw my Saturday routine off a little bit because I'm used to like being able to run some errands, do some stuff around the house or whatever, then kind of settle in and watch the game. It's like that timeline is expedited up about 6-7 hours. But I mean, hey, these TV networks, like you said, they pay millions upon billions of dollars to broadcast these college football games. So they kind of dictate our schedules, unfortunately. But before we get out of here, Jack, just plug yourself, plug your work, what you're doing, let people know where they can find you.
So you can follow me on, you mentioned earlier, you still call it Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I think everybody still calls it Twitter. It's at Jack Byers Rivals. Pretty simple there. And, if you're interested in reading any Mississippi State content, you go to BulldogBlitz.com. That's the Mississippi State Rivals affiliate. So I'll be putting out some content this week, about just the matchup against LSU and everything. So you can find everything on there.
All right, Jack, I really appreciate it, man. Look forward to doing this again with you next year, hopefully as a college graduate and a paid employee of some sort of Mississippi State sports coverage entity.
Yeah, that's the dream right now. So hopefully we can make that happen.
All right, man. We're going to speak it into existence, Jack. We appreciate your time. We'll catch you next time, man.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, later.